Hey everyone, welcome to Maymester Business Ethics. I'm Dr. McAleer and I'm a member of our philosophy department. I love Maymester. It's short, it's fast, but if you're consistent, have no worries, you'll do great, right? So if you're just consistent, every day, every second day, you do a little bit of work on this, you'll do great. You know, it's designed to ensure that you succeed. Okay, even though it's a very fast kind of pace, it's a bit unrelenting. As you know, I mean, I know it's only 3 weeks, but as the weeks go by, oh my gosh, more of this, right? But slow and steady wins that race, right? So, look, what does it concern? Let's just do this kind of graphically. All business is a relationship between desire and product, right? That's what business is. They're always trying to feed a product into your desire. That's how they're going to make money, right? So business always has an underlying kind of harmonics, right? Desire, product. Now, if you just look, I'll assume from social media, you've seen that the president is currently, or was, I think he came back today, in China. We'll put that to one side. We're not that interested in that as such, but note who he took with him, right? He took all the principal American tech oligarchs, right? So these crazy rich tech owners. So Elon Musk is the most famous, right? He's the richest man in the world. I think $800 billion, something like that. Tim Cook from Apple. I'll assume most of you. I'm working on an Apple right now. I'll assume many of you have Apple products. There was the guy who owns Nvidia. I don't think Zuckerberg was there, but all the other kind of heavy hitter tech types, they were present. And so the question is, why? Why them? Okay, he took no trade unionists. He took nobody working in poverty alleviation. He took no one working in environmental remediation, right? I mean, it was a very specific group of people that he took. And that's the topic of the text that we're going to look at. Now, this text is, so we're a Jesuit institution, so I wanted to pick something that reflected sort of Jesuit ethics. So the text that we're looking at is published by the Holy See, right? That's the super fancy diplomatic word for the Vatican. It's by what's called a theological commission. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And basically, it's a philosophical proposal. Now, there is some theology in it, but we're not going to look at the theology. I love theology. I'll assume some of you do as well. But this is core ethics through the philosophy department. So my job is to convey to you the kind of the philosophical aspects, right? Not the theological aspects. So we're going to be looking at a philosophical, ethical text that explains why it is that the president took tech billionaires on that trip and not all the other kind of Americans that he could have taken. So we need to kind of unpack that, right? And the church, the Holy See, the Vatican, does this through the idea of transhumanism or post-humanism. You may have come across those words, right? They're a little current, right? And for very deep reasons that this document is going to kind of pull out for you. So I'm just going to talk in this video. So there's going to be two more videos. One of the videos will be about the problem, transhumanism, and the other will be about the ethical principles of this theological commission text. Now, what's the problem? So I've assigned three possible topics. So let's just look at the Bachona topic, right? So this is a fashion look for women that began, or at least was made famous by, wives and girlfriends of cartel bosses, right? picks up on an interesting phenomenon. So the Vatican says that any business must commit to enhancing human agency. Right? So one of the peculiar things about the way that you and I digest technology is that we don't own it. Other people own it. The tech billionaires that went to China with the president, they own it. So there's an asymmetry, right? We use it. Now, sometimes we're charged for using it. So with an Apple iPhone, for example, but sometimes, right, it's kind of free entry, right? But as you know, right, they're data mining you, right? They're noting and quantifying the character of your desire, because all business is about that, okay? But sometimes, right, you do that in a very frank and open way. But with technology, there's something trickier about it. Go back to the Bachuna. So the article, I just gave you one article to kind of get you started on this phenomenon. I'll assume some of you who are very kind of on Instagram and all that, I'll assume some of you kind of know about this, right? But the article points out that it's not quite clear that these women have agency. The girlfriends and wives, right, of cartel bosses, right? But the important point for us is, do you and I have agency around the technology that we use, and in the Bachuna case, around the fashions that we use to build our identity? And I'll come on to identity in a second. So if you just look at the Bachuna, right, that's pharmacology. In terms of like the businesses, right, that's pharmacology. That's linked with cosmetics. That's linked with surgeries, medical tourism, or just medical enhancements, or the whole business of hospitals, right there. Right, a third of the US economy is built around medicine. It's an extremely profitable area, right? Because it goes to the very issue of transhumanism, which we'll come back onto in a second. And then just more broadly, right, the clothing industry, right, since it's a real particular look, right, that's connected with fashion. And if the commentators are right about the origins of that look, right, it's a look that actually is spreading out and becoming more defining of Latin American experience. Okay, and then to the degree, right, that America has an absolutely enormous Hispanic community, then it's a large part of the American look. Okay, so let's keep unpacking some of the issues. So the text covers four phenomena or divisions, right? So the first is the problem, right? And the problem is human self-creation or human recreation, right? That, I think, is where the Vatican is at. That really what's going on with technology today is that it's actually aiming at a recreation. We'll see that when we get into the next video on transhumanism. So you've got the phenomenon of recreation. Now, at the mild end, right, that's part of the American experience, right? The American dream. That's part of living in a capitalist or commercial civilization like you and I do, right? All commerce is connected with, we have loads of expressions in English for this, right? Best foot forward, making the most of yourself, playing around with identity, bettering your condition, right? So the American dream, just generally, right, is about self-creation, right? Putting yourself forward in some way to be kind of present in the society, judged by that society. Okay, so you just think about influences, right, and how that works. Okay, so that's the first issue. the businesses that are generating new ideals of human identity. So another possibility I gave you, right, were these. I love these movies. I'll be honest with you. That's why I assigned them. So I hope you like the movies. These Megan movies, right? And the most critical point for us is that these Megan movies, right? So she's a robot, right? It's a toy company. She's created by a toy company that's thinking about, wait, toys, like with technology now, like how do toys figure in the human imagination? And so obviously, right, what they think, that's the kind of the backstory to the movie, right? What they think is, well, somehow linking toys and technology, robots, that's the way to go, right? It's much more complicated than that, right? But or you will get there, right? If you pick that topic. So, but anyway, business, identity, self-creation, recreation. That's the first section of the text that you're going to be reading. And that text is online. And it's not terribly long, but it's going to take time. Then you've got the ethical principles, right? So when the Church or the Vatican looks at this business phenomenon, it says, well, wait, what are the ethical principles? And it puts forward this idea of solidarity, or the actual expression in the text is called solidary humanism. So humanism is the philosophical idea, the civilizational idea that, well, what civilizations do is they affirm the human being. And the Church says that all business must affirm human agency. Loads of business does this. But some businesses, and that's the question that I want you to be looking at, some businesses suspend that agency. So let's look at businesses that kind of affirm our agency. Now, this is another possible topic, right? There are three possible topics. The third possible topic is to look at some heritage brands in the fashion world connected with motor cars, clothing, that, or sports adventure, that's the Balstaff. If you don't know these brands that I gave you, right? So I gave you the one you'll know for sure, right? Is Range Rover, right? Because you have just to be alive in and around, say, Baltimore, right, to see that the upper middle classes drive Range Rovers. And then Cucinelli, that's an Italian company, super elite fashion company, and the man who owns it is very much a kind of a philosopher, a humanistic philosopher. And so I give you pointers there, right? And then Balstaff. Balstaff is it arose out of a kind of a motorcycling culture in England a long time ago, and now Balstaff is kind of a fashion brand connected with motorcycling, aviation, cars, not so much country pursuits as like a certain kind of traditional country kind of fashion in a city setting, right? You can think about the brands, right? So any of you who are going into marketing, branding, that's a really good one for you. Okay, so the question is, do these companies enhance human agency? Right, so that's the kind of the second division of the text, right? First division is what the problem is, second is what are the moral principles, and then the third division is what you would hope, right? The application, although you're going to have to do this, right? The application of the principles to the problem. The Vatican does that, but you're going to do it very explicitly in your chosen business topic. And then there's a fourth section, but we're not going to do that. Okay, and I tell you that on the Moodle page, right? Everything's documented on the page. Start at the top of the Moodle page, go down, it'll guide you through the 3 weeks, but we're going to skip the fourth section because that's the theology section. Super interesting. If you're interested, read it, you'll enjoy it, but it's just not quite where we're at. If you'd done this class with a theologian, they'd be pointing at that section, right, more than the stuff that I'm pointing at. Okay, so let's do this. Let's just talk about the Theological Commission. It literally gives you the names. Some of them are Jesuits. That's why I wanted to do it, right? Because we're a Jesuit institution. And I think I maybe mentioned that there's a new papal encyclical coming out by the Pope, because this document, the Pope has signed it, but it's the basis of a much more elaborate document that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks. Don't know exactly when, but it could drop while we're doing this class, which would be kind of cool. But we're not out, you could read it obviously, but it's going to be quite long and elaborate. Okay, so that's the Theological Commission. Bunch of Catholic intellectuals, some of them Jesuits, sitting around thinking about this problem, right? And what is the problem? So here's the thing. Church says humans are both great and fragile. So our greatness, for example, capacity that we have to make MRI machines, unbelievable, right? And these MRI machines, right, they're a technology, so they're about $5 million for a hospital to buy one. It's about $5 million. This is why hospital care is expensive, right? $5 million, and they're incredible, right? Because they enable full body scans, and doctors can then kind of get to work on you and build you up and re-deliver to you. If you're sickly, they can re-deliver to you your agency. Fantastic, okay? And then there's the machines that make the microprocessing chips that are inside the MRI machine, right? So the MRI machine costs $5 million. The machine that makes the microprocessing chips, they cost $400 million, and they're only made in one country in the world. That's the Netherlands. Any microprocessing that is done has to have these very special machines. This is good. These are good businesses, right? Because they affirm our dignity. They affirm our agency, as the church puts it. But is all technology like that? So that's what the church calls development, greatness, but then there's the problem of fragility, right? No matter how good the MRI machine is, right, it can't solve every problem. So you and I are vulnerable. This is why, just to speak theologically for a second, right? Catholic Church proposes the cross, crucifixion of Christ, right, as somehow the greatness of the human being, Jesus, but also the suffering, the weakness, the damage, the handicap, right? So this is, you and I inescapably enter into this problem. So here's the question. What's the right approach to that? Now, the church says it must be solidary humanism, right? Well, we're all in it together. We're all affirming each other. And the question is, are all businesses working like that? So, for example, in the Meghan movies, this is exactly what the toy company is doing, right? So there's the child who has lost her parents. She's grieving, she's suffering, and her aunt, who becomes her guardian, introduces the Meghan doll to kind of lift her spirits and to even help her with socialization and to help her with human growth. So this seems good, but then of course it's a movie about a robot, so things start going wrong, right? You might well predict that. Well, there's the point, right? Can our great technologies, like the MRI machine, this is great, can they cure our fragility? Transhumanism is the philosophical idea that technology can revolutionize what it means to be a human being. And the church thinks, yeah, that's not going to happen. And it's not just not going to happen, the cost is going to be the diminution of our agency. Okay, so that's just to kind of set a few things up, right? Basically, what are you going to be looking at? You're going to be looking at three possible areas of business that address the fundamental problem of our identity. And that identity metaphysically, right, big structure, metaphysically, that identity is our greatness and our vulnerability, our capacity to be wounded. But it also addresses the other thing that you in particular, less me, because I'm older, but you in particular are really ground zero for, namely, kind of working out your identity. Like, who are you? Who do you want to be? What are the tools that you have, right? So let's just think about, right? So let's think about a big moment at Loyola. St. Patrick's Day, right? So people wear green. Okay, well, there are businesses that supply green outfits, right? So, 1 second, I'll be right back.